The tropical sun beamed down as the small charter plane sliced through the air, its passengers buzzing with anticipation. For most, the weekend promised luxury and relaxation on a private island, courtesy of William Fellows, the enigmatic billionaire whose business our firm courted relentlessly. For me, it was an opportunity to unwind with Lucy, my wife of 12 years. Little did I know, this weekend would change everything. Lucy sat next to me, scrolling through her phone with a radiant smile. Her long blonde hair fell perfectly over her shoulders, her blue eyes sparkling with excitement. She hadn't stopped talking about William since we received the invitation 2 weeks ago. The way she described him, a self-made man, effortlessly charming, had been flattering at first. Now, her enthusiasm felt unsettling. She seemed more animated than usual, a side of her I hadn't seen in years. "You're going to love him," she said, her voice tinged with admiration. "He's got this way of making everyone feel important. And wait until you see the island, it's supposed to be incredible." I smiled tightly, masking the flicker of irritation. "I'm sure he's great," I replied, turning my attention to the window. The island came into view, a pristine crescent of white sand surrounded by turquoise waters. My breath caught in my throat. It was, indeed, incredible. The plane touched down smoothly on the island's private airstrip, where we were greeted by William himself. He was every bit as charismatic as Lucy had described, tall, silver-haired, with the confident ease of someone who had nothing to prove. He shook my hand firmly, his smile warm, but his attention quickly shifted to Lucy. "Lucy," he said, his voice rich and commanding. "It's wonderful to see you again." Her cheeks flushed as she returned his smile. "William, it's been too long." I stood there awkwardly, feeling like an intruder in their reunion. William's wife, a striking brunette named Charlotte, appeared moments later, her elegance a perfect match for the island's opulence. She greeted everyone graciously, though her presence seemed more obligatory than enthusiastic. The weekend began with drinks on the veranda overlooking the bay. The atmosphere was casual yet sophisticated, a seamless blend of business and pleasure. Lucy and William seemed to gravitate toward each other, their laughter ringing louder than the rest. I told myself it was harmless, professional camaraderie, but a knot formed in my stomach. The first night passed uneventfully. After dinner, Lucy and I returned to our suite, a stunning bungalow perched on stilts above the water. She was unusually affectionate, her touch lingering, her kisses deeper than they had been in months. It was as if she was compensating for something, and for a moment, I let myself believe that this weekend was rekindling something in her. But the unease returned the next morning. As we joined the group for breakfast, I noticed William and Lucy deep in conversation, their heads bent close together. I tried to dismiss it, focusing instead on the day's activities, snorkeling, kayaking, exploring the island's lush trails. Yet, every time I looked for Lucy, she seemed to be with William. By the time dinner rolled around, my nerves were frayed. The group gathered on the veranda once more, the golden light of the setting sun casting a warm glow. The conversation flowed easily, and I forced myself to laugh along, trying to ignore the subtle glances exchanged between my wife and our host. It wasn't until we returned to our suite that night that I decided to act. Lucy stepped into the shower, humming a tune, her mood buoyant. Her phone lay on the bedside table, unlocked. My heart pounded as I picked it up, my hands trembling. What I found shattered me. A series of messages between Lucy and William painted a picture I couldn't deny. The flirtation, the innuendos, the plans they had made under my nose, it was all there in black and white. My vision blurred as anger and humiliation surged through me. I had trusted her. I had believed in us. And now, I was the fool. The sound of the water stopped, and I hastily replaced the phone. Lucy emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel, her hair damp and her cheeks flushed. "What are you doing?" she asked, noticing my tense posture. "Nothing," I replied, forcing a smile. Just checking some emails. She didn't seem to notice the strain in my voice, climbing into bed with a contented sigh. I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Confronting her now would lead to nothing but denials and excuses. I needed a plan, a way to reclaim my dignity and make her face the consequences of her betrayal. As Lucy drifted off to sleep, I stared out at the moonlit water, my resolve hardening. This weekend would not end the way they planned. They had underestimated me. And soon, they would regret it. The next morning, I woke up before Lucy, the weight of my discovery pressing heavily on my chest. She lay beside me, her expression peaceful, as if she were oblivious to the storm brewing in my mind. For a moment, I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman I had loved for over a decade with the stranger I had uncovered in her texts. Betrayal is a peculiar thing, it transforms even the most familiar face into something unrecognizable. I stepped outside onto the balcony, the early morning sun glinting off the water. The air smelled of salt and flowers, a deceptive contrast to the chaos within me. My thoughts churned as I replayed the messages over and over in my mind. The flirtation, the mockery, the plans, how long had this been going on? How many other trips, other moments, had I been blind to? The door behind me creaked open, and Lucy stepped out, wrapping herself in a light robe. "You're up early," she said, her voice still soft with sleep. "Couldn't sleep," I replied, keeping my tone even. She joined me, leaning on the railing. "It's beautiful, isn't it? This place feels like a dream." I nodded, biting back the urge to say something biting. It wasn't the place that felt unreal, it was her. Breakfast that morning was a lively affair, with the group chatting excitedly about the day's plans. William played the charming host, his confidence and charisma filling the space effortlessly. Lucy seemed to bask in his attention, laughing at his jokes and hanging on his every word. It was almost unbearable to watch, but I forced myself to keep my composure. By midday, we were out on the water, a fleet of kayaks slicing through the turquoise waves. William led the group, with Lucy close behind him. I stayed toward the back, my focus on the conversation happening ahead of me. Their laughter carried over the water, a taunting melody that fueled the fire inside me. At one point, William turned back, his eyes meeting mine. There was something in his gaze, a quiet challenge, perhaps. Or maybe it was a gloating recognition of the power he thought he held. I matched his stare, unflinching, and his smile faltered ever so slightly before he turned back to Lucy. That evening, as the group gathered for dinner, I decided it was time to act. My plan was simple: gather more evidence, play the role of the clueless husband, and strike when they least expected it. The stakes were too high to act on impulse. If I wanted to come out of this with my dignity intact, I needed precision. As the others mingled, I excused myself, claiming I needed to make a quick phone call. I returned to our suite, where Lucy's phone sat on the dresser. My hands trembled as I opened it, scrolling through the messages once more. They had made plans for later that night, an after-party, at one of the secluded cabanas near the beach. Perfect. I took screenshots of their conversations and sent them to my email for safekeeping. My chest tightened with every line, but I forced myself to keep reading. The more ammunition I had, the stronger my position would be when the time came. By the time I returned to the group, my resolve had solidified. I found Lucy chatting with William near the bar, their body language too familiar for colleagues. She didn't notice me approach until I was standing directly behind her. "Hey, love," I said, slipping an arm around her waist. She stiffened for a moment before relaxing into my touch, her smile faltering as she glanced at William. "Mark," she said, her voice overly bright. "I was just telling William about that trip we took to Napa Valley last year." "Ah, yes," I said, forcing a smile. "The one where you drank me under the table." The tension between us was palpable, but neither of them seemed willing to address it. William excused himself moments later, leaving us alone. "You've been quiet today," Lucy said, her tone cautious. "Just taking it all in," I replied. "This place is incredible. And you seem to be enjoying yourself." She hesitated, searching my face for a hint of accusation, but I gave her nothing. "It's hard not to," she said finally. That night, I pretended to fall asleep early, feigning exhaustion from the day's activities. Lucy slipped out of bed an hour later, her movements careful and deliberate. I heard the soft click of the door closing behind her, and my heart pounded as I waited a few minutes before following. The moon cast a silver glow over the island as I made my way to the cabanas. The sound of the waves masked my footsteps as I approached. Peering around a corner, I saw them, Lucy and William, standing close, their laughter soft and intimate. I stayed hidden, my phone in hand, recording every moment. It was painful to watch, but necessary. When William leaned in to kiss her, I captured it all. The final nail in the coffin. As I made my way back to the suite, my mind raced with possibilities. I had the evidence. Now it was time to use it. This weekend wouldn't end the way they thought. By the time I was done, they would both wish they had never underestimated me. The following morning, I awoke with a sense of calm purpose. My plan was no longer just an abstract idea, it was a sharp-edged reality waiting to unfold. I had the evidence, the timing, and the audience. Now, it was all about execution. Lucy stirred beside me, her expression serene and unsuspecting. She had returned late, slipping into bed as though nothing had happened. She turned to me with a smile. "Morning," she said, brushing her hair from her face. "Morning," I replied, my tone neutral. "Did you sleep well?" She nodded, though a hint of something flickered in her eyes, guilt, perhaps, or the remnants of the night she thought I was unaware of. "Yeah, just a little restless." I let the moment pass, not wanting to tip my hand too early. "I was thinking we should spend the day together," I suggested, as though nothing was amiss. "Explore the island, just the two of us." Her smile wavered, and she glanced at her phone. "I think William mentioned something about organizing another group activity. Maybe snorkeling." "Sounds great," I said, masking my irritation at her casual deflection. "We'll join in." Breakfast was a lively affair on the veranda, the group chatting over fresh fruit and pastries. William held court as usual, his charm in full force. Lucy sat close to him, her laughter too bright, too easy. I watched from the edge of the conversation, my silence deliberate. As the group dispersed to prepare for the day's activities, I approached William. He was standing by the veranda railing, gazing out at the ocean. "William," I said, forcing a friendly tone. "Got a moment?" He turned, his expression unreadable but polite. "Of course, Mark. What's on your mind?" "I just wanted to thank you," I began, keeping my voice light, "for hosting this weekend. It's been enlightening." A flicker of something crossed his face, confusion, perhaps, or suspicion, but he covered it quickly with a smile. "It's my pleasure. I'm glad you and Lucy could join us." "Oh, we wouldn't have missed it," I said, the edge in my words subtle. "It's been quite the experience." He nodded, his gaze shifting toward the others as they gathered on the beach. "Well, I hope you enjoy the rest of the weekend." "Oh, I will," I said, my tone darker now. "I plan to make the most of it." I turned before he could respond, leaving him to wonder what I meant. The afternoon passed in a blur of forced smiles and hollow laughter. Lucy and I joined the group for snorkeling, her demeanor as cheerful as ever. If she suspected anything, she didn't show it. Meanwhile, I stayed close, observing every interaction, every glance between her and William. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting the island in hues of gold and crimson, I knew the moment had come. Dinner that evening would be the perfect stage. The veranda was set beautifully, the long table adorned with candles and fresh flowers. The group gathered, their spirits high after another day in paradise. William sat at the head of the table, Lucy to his right. I took a seat further down, biding my time. The conversation flowed easily as the first course was served, laughter echoing against the backdrop of crashing waves. I waited until the main course, my heart pounding as I rehearsed my words. When the plates were cleared, I rose from my seat, holding up my glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," I began, my voice cutting through the chatter. The group fell silent, their attention turning to me. Lucy's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing slightly. William leaned back in his chair, his expression curious but cautious. "To new beginnings," I said, lifting my glass. "And to the truth." A murmur of confusion rippled through the group. I turned my gaze to Lucy, my expression hard. "Lucy, my love, you've certainly made this a weekend to remember." Her eyes widened, a flicker of panic flashing across her face. "Mark, what are you?" I cut her off, my voice rising. "Do you know what makes paradise so dangerous? The illusion. The beauty hides the rot beneath. And sometimes, that rot is closer than you think." I reached into my pocket, pulling out my phone. With a few taps, I projected the messages between Lucy and William onto the screen set up behind the table. Gasps erupted around the table as the texts appeared, undeniable, explicit, damning. Lucy's face turned pale as she stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. William's confident demeanor cracked, his composure slipping into something closer to panic. "And if words aren't enough," I said, my voice cold, "here's a little more context." I played the video I had recorded the night before, the stolen kisses, the laughter, the betrayal. The group watched in stunned silence, the weight of the evidence hanging heavy in the air. "Mark, please," Lucy finally managed, her voice trembling. "Let me explain." "Explain?" I said, my voice sharp. "Explain how you betrayed our marriage. How you mocked me behind my back. Or how you thought you could get away with it." She tried to reach for me, but I stepped back, my disgust evident. "Save your excuses, Lucy. You've said enough." William rose, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Mark, let's be reasonable about this." I turned to him, my eyes blazing. "Reasonable? You mean like respecting another man's marriage? Like not playing the charming host while you sneak around with his wife?" The silence that followed was deafening. No one dared to speak or move. "This weekend was supposed to be about business," I continued, my voice steady. "But it's become so much more. It's become the moment I take back my life." I placed divorce papers on the table, the final piece of my plan. "These are for you, Lucy. Signed and ready. I've already transferred my share of our assets to a separate account. You can keep the rest. I want nothing from you." Tears streamed down her face as she reached for the papers, her hands trembling. "Mark, please." "Goodbye, Lucy," I said, turning to leave. "Enjoy your new beginnings." As I walked away from the table, the sound of the waves swallowed the stunned whispers behind me. My heart ached, but there was a strange sense of relief. I had taken control. I had reclaimed my dignity. And I was finally free. As I walked away from the veranda, the sounds of the gathering receded into the background. The warm tropical air wrapped around me, but it couldn't touch the cold knot of anger and betrayal in my chest. I headed toward the edge of the property, to a secluded stretch of beach I'd discovered the previous day. It was where I planned to gather my thoughts and figure out my next steps. The plan had unfolded perfectly. Lucy was exposed, William humiliated. I had made my point and salvaged what remained of my dignity. But as I stared out at the endless ocean, the finality of it all settled on me like a lead weight. 12 years of marriage, dismantled in one night. What now? The crunch of footsteps in the sand jolted me from my thoughts. I turned to see Charlotte, William's wife, approaching. Her elegant dress swayed in the evening breeze, and her face was calm, almost serene, as if she had been waiting for this moment. "Mark," she said softly, stopping a few feet away. "May I join you?" I nodded, gesturing to the spot beside me. "Didn't expect to see you here." She sank gracefully onto the sand, her hands resting in her lap. "I thought you might need some company." I chuckled bitterly. "Not sure I'm the best company right now." Charlotte tilted her head, her gaze steady. "You handled it well. Most men would have flown into a rage, made a scene. You were, composed. Dignified." I scoffed. "Dignified? I just blew up my marriage in front of half my company. Doesn't feel very dignified." She smiled faintly. "Sometimes, dignity comes from walking away, not staying." We sat in silence for a while, the waves lapping gently at the shore. Finally, she spoke again. "I've known about William's tendencies for years. I stayed because it was easier, because I thought I could control the narrative. But tonight, watching you, I realized something. There's strength in letting go." Her words struck a chord, but I couldn't shake the gnawing doubt. "What now? For either of us?" She glanced at me, her eyes shimmering with something I couldn't quite place. "That's the beauty of endings, isn't it? They're also beginnings." I turned to her, the moonlight casting her features in sharp relief. "Charlotte, why did you stay with him? If you knew." Her smile turned wistful. "For the same reasons people stay in any situation, they convince themselves it's worth it, that it will change, that they're safer where they are than out in the unknown. But sometimes, you meet someone who reminds you what's possible when you choose differently." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. My heart quickened as I searched her expression for clarity. Was she suggesting what I thought she was? Before I could respond, the sound of hurried footsteps interrupted us. Lucy appeared at the edge of the beach, her face streaked with tears. "Mark," she called out, her voice desperate. "Please, can we talk?" I rose to my feet, my anger flaring again. "Talk? After everything?" Charlotte stood as well, her posture composed but her presence suddenly imposing. "Lucy," she said coolly, "I think you've said enough for one night." Lucy's eyes darted between us, realization dawning in her expression. "What's going on here? Are you serious, Mark?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Lucy, go back to the bungalow. There's nothing left to discuss." Her tears turned to anger. "You think you can just walk away from this? From us? You can't throw away 12 years like they mean nothing." 12 years? I snapped, my voice rising. "You threw those away when you chose him, when you lied to me over and over again. Don't you dare lecture me about what's worth saving." Lucy froze, the weight of my words finally sinking in. She turned and stormed back toward the main house, her figure disappearing into the night. Charlotte placed a hand on my arm, her touch grounding me. "You did the right thing." I nodded, my emotions swirling. "What now?" She smiled softly. "Now, you start over." The two of us walked back to the main house together, the tension between us shifting into something lighter, something unspoken. As we reached the edge of the property, she paused, looking at me with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "Mark," she said, her voice low, "if you ever want to explore what's possible beyond endings, you know where to find me." Then, with a graceful turn, she disappeared into the night, leaving me alone with the tantalizing promise of something new. For the first time in years, I felt something other than anger or despair. I felt hope. And maybe, just maybe, a hint of excitement for what was to come.